even though framing wise, a lot of this stuff seems like you're kind of pulling some bits and pieces of it, we're going to segue into the next topic now, which is macro terrain movement, and that's where things really start to tie together. So this is going to be a fun one. I do want to emphasize that this is probably the single most important topic of the entire series. I cannot stress enough how necessary it is that you spend some time learning this one. Whether it's looking at great golf courses, the terrain they're on, or just your holes, or some of the more appealing golf courses in this game visually and that kind of stuff. It doesn't happen overnight, but as soon as you start getting your feet wet in these concepts and just working on stuff, making things in the designer, getting a sense for what works, what doesn't, you'll get used to figuring out what places to adjust, where to go, and it will get a lot better and easier. A little bit later on, I do want to do a section in the designer that talks about some places in terms of where to go for common issues or just goals or questions you're trying to solve with framing. That's not going to be this portion. That will come later on. So now, we just looked at Cypress Point purely from how the green's set up. Now we're going to start expanding that and thinking big. We're going to step all the way out beyond the holes themselves. And this is going to be to just looking at the land the holes sit on and just what the terrain is doing. No, yes, to resume. By the way, I should stop. Or any of you who are watching or listening have any questions at this point based on what you've seen?
Hello and welcome back to your previous round on this course. We are starting today on the first hole.
Alrighty. So it looks like we're just going to keep going on now. I want to start by pointing your attention to some relatively small contours over here that seem relatively meaningless, but will very much get into this topic. I want to start by looking over at the land here that holes 6, 10, and 11 occupy. And we can see it's relatively simple. It's flowing downhill kind of a constant direction. There are a couple little land ridges of note and creases in the ground. This here in particular that kind of runs up this way. And there's another little crease here. And if we follow it, see if I can get the lighting a little better on it. Not really. It kind of runs up through here and a little bit into 6 fairway. And this same crease right here, if I can get a... the sun's not behaving right now, so maybe it was a mistake not to set the weather to clear. I actually think I'm going to back out and set the weather to clear here, just so it's a little, just so there's a little more lighting on all of the terrain at all times. That will help with making this section a little smoother. So I want to do new round. I don't care about the keys, we just want weather to be clear. Everything else is default.
Hello there, my name is John. Looking forward to taking in a little bit of golf today. Our
Hopefully this
round
isn't too bright, but
begins
we will see.
with a par 4. Let's get it.
All the way back over to here. Now we can see there's a bit more light here. This contour works its way all the way from here, through this fairway, around at the edge of the fairway in here, and then it goes through here. It's still going. It's coming all the way through here. And then it seems like it ends somewhere in here. And so, why would I point your attention to these little tiny contours? The general idea here is a big concept. It's very, very important. It will take some time to grasp this one, but it will make a huge difference in the long run. It's that. Wait, where is it? There it is. The land outside the hole corridor should tie into the land the hole rests on. Whether it's literally moving or flowing through, if you have harsher terrain outside the hole corridor, you want some of that to spill in a little bit to the fairway terrain. You'll see some of that later on when we take a quick look at Course I Have in Progress, which has very dramatic off-surface sculpting. That's the big way that most of that is tied together. So then after this, we've looked at hole 12 before, the green site here, and how everything just moves nicely off the dune, over here, this little piece of land over here, off this part of the dune with a little V shape towards the green site. But we're going to look at how terrain flow works in combination with framing, which is, we're going to start very macro. So first off, let's look for little bits of terrain that just cut through the fairway. We have this little ridge here, kind of comes over from these bunkers, probably even over from here, well off the side of hole 3. And it cuts through the fairway here, leads towards this bunker, and then if we head back to the tee now and start following this little contour is helping to bring this visual from left to right around this dogleg. It's helping to make the hole look like it turns harder than it does. And there are other land contours too doing the same thing on this. We have some stuff if we look here. There's this one that runs through the fairway, over to this bunker. Looks like it even continues past here, and a little bit into hole 2 fairway. So we have those contours running a little bit longer. And beyond just that, if we look here, way out by hole 2. Hole 2 is occupying a relatively similar slope to the land that 12 is. So all this stuff by 2 is just kind of continuous and going into hole 12. Just as if there's no break to it. And the golf surfaces were just painted onto the land that's already there. Maybe smoothed out a touch to make them more playable, and that's about it. That was actually kind of typical for Mackenzie as far as I know. If we're going to look at some other stuff with the framing here, we can see now that everything kind of flows in from the left, and part of what makes it turn is right up here. This all kind of goes this way. This little bit here starts to crest over the top of this hill, so it kind of moves up and over and around. And this dune bit there is helping to bring it around. It just all flows in this direction. This is an example of when framing and terrain movement start to work together and meet. And then if we look out here, that I mentioned before, this dune feature goes on and on and on. Perhaps it's sculpted up a little bit here for purposes of the golf course, but it's still going on and on all the way through here, and it seems like around this point is where this ridge in the land ends. And I mention that because this goes all the way continuously back to the green site for hole 12. Almost all the way there. It's a little broken up here where we have the tees for 13. But visually, it has that effect. It just goes from here all the way out here, and you can see down this entire coastline, this whole way there, over to where 12 green sits. This is a big thing. Take some time and try to just sit here and absorb some of this. So remember, point here, kind of guide and point here, a little bit of point with the bunkers, and then the terrain, boom, all the way to the green site from far away. Hole 13. This one is a little bit of a more interesting case because this one is essentially a straight golf hole. It doesn't look like a straight golf hole though, and that's for a couple reasons. Well, the first one is the land ridge that we've already looked at, how it plays in the hole 12, this right here. And we have a couple other things. The land movement in here, it's all kind of just flowing through this area, just this way. So it looks like it comes in from the right side. And all the stuff out here, we start heading out there a little more. It's all flowing off this hill too, this way, from the left to the right, towards this dune back here and this green site. And if we look at this from the right side of this hole as well, it's actually kind of doing the same thing. See this out here? It's kind of going all the way down here towards this general green site. The terrain is, in a sense, kind of all meeting at this one point. The land was probably like this. It's so unlikely, especially in real life, that you can sculpt this much stuff just to make one point work like this, especially when you have an ocean front, as you see here. This green would have to be placed here on purpose. And this is why I started this series on routing. Because once you start to get a handle on framing and terrain flow, it's going to help a ton with understanding where to place your greens. Really important. And of course, we remember the bunkers, they're not made super well here, but they are generally pointing towards the green side as well. So now I want to come here for... Wait, where do we go now? We're going to go over to hole 3 actually. And I'm going to drive this point home a little bit more later. We've looked at hole 3 before, but now I want to look at a couple things. Now that we have this in mind with framing, we can see how this dune, everything comes off here towards the green site. This bunker here is pointing towards the green site as well. And if we look at the general terrain movement, it's just continuous up from hole 12 in this direction. We're almost continuous towards the green. It's all going this way and then this way off the dune. So this stuff here, another reason I bring you to this hole in particular is that a lot of people think, oh, you know, par 3s are show holes and that kind of stuff. Well, we'll get back to some of that when I get around to, we're going to revisit Jacola quickly after the Cypress Point detour. And the reason why is I'm going to show you my 10th hole in particular. And that is probably the least quote-unquote spectacular par 3 on the course, but it still looks very good because it has a lot of terrain stuff like this going on. Do not underestimate the importance of terrain flow on par 3s. It's critical. I will probably say that a couple more times in this section. Land movement doesn't just stop because of the type of hole you're building. Then we have hole 5 here. This is more important for the green site. But if we generally know which way this hole goes. Or, let's have a look for those of you who might not know this golf hole. Then it goes this way, turns to the left, up and over this hill, and then that's where the green sits, all the way up there. So if we come back now to the tee, let's start following how the framing works on this hole. The land movement works. Kind of starts out this way, the fairway shape as well, encourages it to move to the left. These bunkers here, helping things draw left this way, and around the dogleg. So another big concept that I haven't mentioned, and I probably should have, is that golf holes don't just turn on their own. Golf holes turn when the land movement suggests and demands that they turn, because the hole and the land should be one. The land here demands that this golf hole turns, so this golf hole turns. And if we just look at the macro stuff here, think about how much more boring this would be if this golf hole just went straight out. You would really have to work very hard adding in all sorts of bunkers and other manually sculpted features to build a nice frame for that. Whereas if it just starts following this land around this way, it's tailor-made to work together. And then the green up here, we can see this bunker, this big finger kind of makes like a middle finger just giving you the bird this way towards the green. And this green side up here, it sits quite high, but we can also see it's falling a little bit off this right side, and then this bit on the left side here is supporting and directing the eye towards this green side. So even though this green side is quite high up, relatively speaking, it still very much fits into the frame. This goes this way, and there's the green. It's in the exact spot where the land suggests that the eyes would be directed to. Then we go to hole 6 here, which I've referenced before. It's a pretty straight golf hole off the tee. We can see here, back to terrain flow, that this hole's on a very steep side hill. Mackenzie did not try to fight that. The hole just follows the terrain. It goes through the hole, down the steep hill, into 10, which continues to go down the hill just a little bit, shallower here, toward 11. And then when we start getting out towards the green side here, if we look now, we know how some of the framing works here based on the picture we looked at earlier, but there's a lot of macro stuff going on too. We pay attention to this land right in here, and it just comes on through, follows the edge of the fairway here, right to the green site. Some of the background stuff does a little bit of that, a little bit this dune here, where it's also placed nicely in relation to the dune on the left. If we look at this one here, remember how this dune looked on 11? And it's also the same dune in the background on hole 3 here. And where it's placed and shaped, it's also guiding the eye, if we follow the top, directly towards the green this way for hole number 6. So these greens are placed in very specific spots on purpose because of the way they work with the land. In game, a lot of what we do doesn't revolve so much placing them there as it can, sculpting the land in a way where it looks natural like this. So you don't just have to take a plot, find the best places to place your greens. There are some that you don't be afraid to sculpt some of them. So we'll come to 7 real quick, and we see a little bit of the same thing happening. And it just comes off the edge here into the green, and a little bit off the right. This one's kind of sitting in its own little bowl as well. If we look at it this way, we can see the land's kind of flowing through here, near where the top of this bunker goes, and it meets at the green. And then it comes up off the hill here. This would be sculpted up a little bit, meets at the green. If you think it sounds repetitive, it's because it is. Conceptually, this is the same thing happening on all of these holes. We're going to add one more little twist. So we're going to go over to 14 here. This example is a little bit more advanced than the ones before it, and this is why. So on this hole, there's one main general land movement direction going on, which is the direction the hole itself moves, kind of out and around. See the way it's following this terrain that goes this way and around? If we zoom out a little more or in, we can see just from here, it's leading directly to where the green is. But there's one other element to this as well off the tee that adds a lot more visual interest. But this is not just single direction. We also have stuff coming off from the coastline, the road, this way, and the fairway's pulling from that. This movement here kind of goes into the hole this way and then around. It's coming off the side, around, and back in the same direction. This is a more complex kind of land movement than we'd seen previously. And then while we're still here, I want to show you one last example on Cypress Point for this portion. I'm going to duck back over to hole 11. And there's some stuff with bunkers that we haven't talked about yet. But the general movement of this hole you can probably see now. It's relatively simple. It's a little bit in off the right. This stuff in here, mostly just straight out. And then it all follows this tree line here, this way, really naturally, very simply, over to this. I don't know if it's dramatic since it's not perched, but dramatic green site right in front of this like 50-foot tall dune. The land itself is following the hole. The hole itself is following the land directly to the target. You look down this hole, and you can try to look off to the sides. It's hard to, because the eye wants to snap back when this meshes really well. Especially if you look off to the left. Oh, nope, it snaps back. Maybe if you get all the way over here, it doesn't. But anywhere within reason here, kind of wants to snap back. Part of it then is we can see here, this terrain is still kind of going that way. And if we looked at the way this dune sits now, the stuff from 6 here also flows a little bit in this direction toward 11 green. So the land on just about the entirety of this course is working really well with itself and the golf holes, so that they both fit really naturally and frame very well. And that's the main point of this, which I had later on my notes. The green should be placed in a location where the hole can both follow the land and naturally be guided to the correct place. One more quick example, actually, just while we're here, because it's staring us in the face. Hole 1. It's a relatively simple par 4. It's just out and back, or straight out, slight dogleg right. But now that we know what to look for, some land movement stuff, we can see all this out here. It's kind of moving this way, and it's helping this hole turn a little bit to the right, visually. And when we get out, we can see some of what's going on with this green site frame-wise. There's a little bit of a dune in the background, this way, kind of helping it go there. This bunker is helping it point up towards the green a little bit. This bunker slightly as well. And then the whole land movement from here just goes this way to the green, and even from here, this way to the green. The land movement and the hole are fitting like a glove. So, content-wise, that's really all I had for this part. I do want to duck back into Coca-Cola real quick, and then if you want, I can show you some stuff on my current work in progress. If some of you guys have been watching me stream and kind of wondered, like, ooh, some of these holes look very good, but how do you do that? This is a large part of how. I think at this point, after maybe 1 or 2 more sections of the tutorial series, it would probably be best to take one away from learning material and just spend some time in the designer answering questions and discussing how a lot of this stuff works and where to go, what to think about with changing things and that kind of stuff. So I want to start actually here from the beginning. Okay. Oh, it's on mouse because designer. So here, I want to just hop over to 9 and 18 really quickly. And if you remember what I mentioned, the land outside the golf hole, in a sense, equals the land in the golf hole and that the surfaces are on. 9 right here, we have this whole ridge feature here that slings its way into and through the fairway, over to this bunker, and it keeps moving a little bit past the bunker over here towards this bunker on 18, and then through most of 18 fairway. There's a little bit still going this way. Now we're at hole 1. This contour runs all the way from 9 through here. It's not completely continuous. Now this way, there's some constant terrain to flow all the way through there. And then some of these here, same kind of thing. This comes into hole 1, flows through 1, out the other side. Then it continues all the way through here and then dumps out at the Barranca start here. I think there are a couple other good spots to look at as well. We can look at some stuff on actually 3. This dune feature here, it just looks like a dune, right? It's not just a dune. The terrain does not stop flowing for this by any means. So we have all these little contours spidering out of this dune, which helps to tie in the land the hole is on a little bit to the terrain off it. Right through here, towards this bunker, all the way from there, through the dune. You catch this little ridge here on the top side of the hole. All this stuff is then going up towards the dune. Sorry about that glitch. Up through this dune. And it's kind of still going, forming a spine here for this hole. And kind of starts to dump out a little bit and mellow out and go into this fairway. And it's also spilling out a little bit here. So it kind of fizzles out in this spot. So this is probably about 300. This is probably 300 or 350 yards of continuous, or not completely continuous as in symmetrical or identical, but unbroken land movement for all that distance. And then what I showed you earlier over by 16, when we were talking about framing for 3, this is all unbroken land movement coming right through here. The terrain is moving through the golf hole this way. We can see here the bunkers point a little bit up, and the terrain moves this way towards the green site. Then we come over to hole 5, and the outer portion of hole 5 is making a lot of this stuff work. It's kind of going over the top and out towards the green, but then there's a lot of terrain coming through it. This way here, this contour goes all the way through a lot of hole 4, all the way through here. And these land contours there are coming from outside the fairway on 5 and most of the way through it. These here, you can see the little ridges coming off, go all the way through to the end of this fairway, and they're meeting this drop off here. It kind of goes from here all the way through to there. And it might sound odd that such a simple thing, in the sense of, well, it's not that simple, but in the sense of the terrain just keeps moving through the surfaces you're playing on. A little bit of the same thing here. You can see all this terrain coming in off the left there, and it kind of continues to come in off the left side of this hole. And this is another example of what is essentially a straight golf hole, but it looks like there's a lot more movement. Like, it kind of comes in here, catches this stuff, and then goes back this way towards where the green site is. If you were to look at like the actual movement of this hole, we're probably looking at figure like this, and then back like that. Or not quite that much, here. So the land's basically doing this and around on a very straight golf hole. There's probably no more than 5 degrees of bend in this on this hole's path, if that. And it's still doing this. Then we come over to 10 here. This is going to be the last example for this course. Then I want to give a couple specific examples from my current work in progress. One is going to be about blind tee shots. It's not the best executed blind tee shot at this point on my current course, but it's not bad either. We'll get there. But here, another par 3. And if we notice, it's kind of coming off here towards the green. It's kind of very much going this way from all the way out here towards this green site. And in the back we can see kind of this way as well. It's all flowing with this green. And the green sits right in the middle, and these bunkers here are pointing towards it, and features to kind of say, okay, this is the target, this is where we look. I will be coming back to this hole later on in the series when we touch back on some more in-depth framing concepts. But for now, that's all the business we have here. We're going to go to current course. And we're going to take a look at a couple holes on it. In particular, we're going to drive home the par 3 topic. Land movement on par 3s is absolutely critical. Told you guys I'd mention that again and again. But also on blind tee shots. On blind tee shots, it is absolutely, positively critical that the macro terrain movement is good and that it kind of directs the player's attention to where they should be looking. In the sense that if we come over here, this is also far from finished. It's not polished. It's just mostly there for now. Tee is right here. This is completely blind. You don't see any of this fairway. Yet, by look at the way the land moves, it kind of starts here and down and then up to this side, you have the sense, before I show you what's on the other side, that the hole's probably going to be moving out and a little bit to the left. If we go out and over, what do you know? The hole moves out and then around the hill to the left. The idea is, on a decent blind tee shot visual, you can tell what the hole is doing without seeing what it does. And that has everything to do with terrain flow. Critical. Then we can go to the very next hole here. What I mentioned about par 3s and land movement. We have the same thing here as hole 10 on Jacola, but from the opposite direction. It's all kind of coming in this way for the most part. And then we have this little ridge behind 14 green going this way, leading closer to the green site for hole 12 as well. Using what we now know about bunkers and pointing them, we have this bunker, almost a little bit too consistent and symmetrical though. It's good enough for now. Pointing this way. These bunkers back here are kind of pointing this way towards the green. And this large back bunker is not actually for hole 12. This is for hole 14's green. But it's still very much a part of the visual for hole 12. On that topic, there is one other thing I very much forgot as well. I'm actually going to jump out of here just to take a quick peek, or I can do some of that here. The idea is, when you're building a visual, and we'll cover this a little more later, think about what else there is on the course and how it works with what you have in front of you. So this right here, kind of have this green site and this little ridge all the way out in the distance here, kind of suggesting that the land goes this way. Comes down off this hill towards the green. The bunker here is helping to kind of point a little bit up and in this direction. And we can come to another par 3 hole here, where the bunkers, these are a little more complicated. I don't want to dip into these quite yet, but the general terrain flow here is kind of in the foreground, closer in from here, and then a little more in the distance comes in off the left side up towards the green. This is kind of like 14 at Cypress, where we have stuff here and then stuff here, kind of in that case around the dogleg. In this case, because it's a par 3, there's no dogleg, it's just a single shot, it goes towards the green side. And then hole 3 here. This one's, there's no planting here, so you won't be able to see as much in the distance. And I don't think I sculpted all this stuff here, particularly to fit hole 3's green site. But if we look at the general movement of the land here, it kind of rests on a little bit of that ridge line like you'd have on 7 and then later on with 10 here. And these are some prominent features of the course in this style. And when we look at hole 3, we can see here that even this little bit of creek is kind of working in the same direction. The edge of what you see here very much goes this way and around. And if we follow that whole edge, it goes to the green. And if we follow this terrain here, comes off this hillside to the green. And this stuff in the background, this way to the green, and through here to the green, and back through here to the green. That's part of why, even though this hole is only mostly finished sculpting wise, and definitely not planted, there's not a single tree or plant in this, it still has an aesthetic appeal to it. That is why. Because a lot of this macro stuff is working pretty well. Really, really important. I cannot stress that you guys spend time looking at stuff for this topic. Extremely important. So I'm going to do one last little thing now, which is going to be just to finish this off on using features from other holes as parts of the visual. I don't know if you guys remember, but I included the hole 10 on Pacific Dunes very briefly in part 1, discussing green sites. We're going to revisit that really quickly just to take a little peek at one other thing that's going on. We're not going to dip into so much how the bunkers here are functioning in their entirety, but I want to point out that if you notice behind to the right of the green for hole 10 on Pacific Dunes, the bunkers that are in a little bit of the so-called TIFU, top it fuck you position for hole 11. Great name, by the way. No thank you to Andrew Green. The bunkers in that position are very much playing into the visual for hole 10's green site on those back-to-back par 3s. So right in here, we have, oh look, there's bunkers. And what do you know? They're kind of pointing back towards this green site. And also now that we have a little bit more understanding of macro terrain coming back here, we can see this dune obviously kind of goes this way and down towards the green. This stuff here kind of goes down that way towards the green. And notice the way this contour here comes off and then over right to, in this case, even into the green. This is a little bit of foreshadowing to something we'll get to later on. The general concept is the same. It goes from off the playing surfaces into and through the playing surfaces, and then again exits out the playing surfaces. Always through everything. The terrain keeps flowing. Macro terrain, it doesn't stop, it flows, it does its own thing. So that, at this point, I believe is all of the material that I wanted to cover. Actually, there's one more little bit. And it's just a very quick point. And it's that if you're having trouble with getting one of your visuals to work, and you keep fixing a lot of small things and it doesn't quite get there, there's a very decent chance that there are some larger macro terrain flow or height issues present. Especially terrain flow. Very important. I still make this mistake somewhat frequently. Not nearly as much as it did when I was new and first learning this stuff. But if the terrain flow is not there, it's really hard to get things to look right no matter what you do. And then you wonder, oh, I've tried all this stuff and my golf hole's still not, the visual's still not looking right. What's going on here? 90% of the time, it can even be as simple as just like 2 raised brush clicks in the right spot and boom, then it works. So that's something that I definitely want to spend a little bit of time explaining, or maybe even start a new plot. So I actually started one for this tutorial series to potentially use as an example. And maybe going in. Can even do some of that, no, not now. For a future part. We'll basically choose some places that could be green sites where, based on what we went through starting, a spot where the land naturally guides the eye to. And then we're going to start making some adjustments just so that we can get a golf hole down and have everything flow really nicely from tee down the length of the golf hole and to the green. So that's also why, based on in terms of how framing works, it's very much like these two topics go hand in hand together, and that's why I wanted to cover both of them at the same time. Because macro terrain is really just building on the basics of framing, and the framing is coming from macro terrain stuff working well. So that's all I have planned at this point. Do you guys have any questions on this stuff? So we kind of covered a lot. And this is definitely another step up in complexity from where we started this series. If any of you are watching, that is. If not, that's totally okay as well. Also, I hope I didn't move too quickly for you guys, that it was in a relatively simple manner to break down and understand. So if there are no questions from you guys, we can end off here. I would like to just very quickly touch on some of the topics that will be coming next. The very next thing, once we have terrain flow down, is going to be looking back at natural features and hazards, and now looking at how they fit into the bigger picture of terrain flow and framing. After that, we could either dip into a little bit of stuff in the designer with these concepts, or before then, we can spend some time starting to get into some bunker sculpting topics, bunker shapes and sculpting, get that kicked off. Those would be the next two topics that I have listed. And that's really all I got. So that's what's going to come next. I hope you guys enjoyed. I hope you learned a little bit from this. And I will catch you guys next time in part 5.